right, council is now back from recess. It is 7:15 p.m. We're going to go to open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for members of the public to address the city council on items that may or may not be on a current agenda. Items requiring council action may be deferred to staff or boards and commissions for research and future council agendas if appropriate. You will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that you conduct yourself in a professional, courteous manner and refrain from the use of profanity. Failure to abide by this policy may result in the loss of your privilege to speak. When you do come up, we do ask that you give your, state your full name and your address. So we have, right now I see is one speaker, Scott and Gloria Norton, would like to come up and speak.
Good evening, Ms. Mayor.
Mayor, excuse me, sir. State their name and address for the record.
Oh,
okay.
Yep. Do you?
Scott and Gloria Norton, 21547 Volga Street Northeast, Wyoming, Minnesota, 55092.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Mayor, City Council members, City Administrator and staff, and attendees. We have called the City of Wyoming our home and community for the past 47 years. We have raised 7 children, and at the end of this year, we'll have 21 grandchildren to boast about. We are present here tonight because we want to have a positive impact on our family and as well as others who will experience our community. We want to thank you very much for this opportunity to address you in the open forum of your meeting. First, we want to applaud you for the celebration of Christmases past with lights and festive activities held in Railroad Park. In addition, we want to thank you for the development of Railroad Park that will honor our veterans and also improve our community. The Railroad Park development plan includes the continued use of the existing majestic evergreen for future holiday tree lighting. As stated in our emails to the members, we propose that you consider incorporating a nativity of Jesus Christ's birth as a significant visible part of the holiday lights display during the Christmas season of 2023 and the ensuing years thereafter. The origin and basis of the Christmas celebration is Christ's birth, or as often said, Jesus is the reason for the season. Being a Christian symbol, the Nativity is part of our heritage of our nation, which was founded on Christian principles. We believe that in recent years, everyone has experienced significant changes, some perplexing. From approximately 1970 to the year 2020, the U.S. law was questioned the inclusion of religious symbols such as nativities, crosses, and etc. in public places, but has since been ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court as legally constitutional, giving us the freedom to do it and to do it again. Our older children tell us that they remember when a nativity was included in the Wyoming City Christmas celebration. It is our desire to have our grandchildren and others of the community experience this special observance as well. Thank you for your consideration of this proposal. We look forward to your decision. If you have any questions for us, we can answer them now, or you can contact us later.
Thank you very much. Very well written, and we really appreciate that. Mr. Norton, are you a veteran?
No.
You're not? Okay. And congratulations on 21 grandchildren. That's amazing. So thank you for coming up here. It's never easy in open forum. Was there any questions from council? Otherwise, we'll defer to city staff to look into this and see what can be done. Does that sound good?
I just have one thing I'd like to add. The biggest reason it's not there is because it invites everything. And there's nothing, I don't have an opinion on it either way, but the moment we put that in, we have to put everything that goes with it. There's a reasoning for that. And there's also a group in the United States that watches for this as well. So we put the nativity scene up, they'll come put their satanic stuff up and request it. So it's a hard thing for a lot of cities to do, and my understanding is we live in a government that is supposed to be a separation of church and state. So there isn't supposed to be a designated religion in our government. Yes, we were founded on freedom of religion, but that's everything. So we would have to be inclusive with all religions. So it's a tough thing for me to vote on if I was to talk about it. It's one of those things that it invites all the ugly with it, if that makes sense.
I understand what you say, but may I respond?
Sure.
Yeah.
We're saying the Supreme Court was recently, they overturned the Lemon versus Kurtzen,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And that, we say, allowed us to go ahead and put back things such as crosses and nativities in public spaces.
Yep, absolutely. No, it does say that we can put it back, but that allows everybody else to request to do it, and we have to honor it. We can't pick and choose which one. That's the problem we have as a council.
But to me, doesn't it make sense that if Christmas is a Christian holiday, that at that time you would want to celebrate what is that holiday really represents?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I work in a city where we can't say the word Christmas. So,
Well, if we can, if you're okay with it, we'll refer to our attorney
Yeah.
and city, and then I can get back to you. Rob might get back to you, Mr. Lindstrom as well, or Mr. Lunan. So we really appreciate it. I understand what you're saying as a Christian. I totally understand. I also know
yeah,
what
I grew up
councilmember
Christian. My whole
Schilling
family is diehard Christian. So it's one of those
It's
tough
hard.
things that I have to.
And Madam Mayor, maybe I could just weigh in
Yeah.
briefly, is the decision with regards to Lemon is it changed the standard, but it still does, there still is a test that's applied, and there's considerations if the city itself were to establish and be the ones to sponsor any sort of religious symbol on city property, if that were to come down from the city. And that standard still has to be considered, and Councilmember Schilling is correct that we would need to be careful if it was the city making such a decision to be running afoul of the establishment clause, where the city now has put forth the non-secular reason in establishing obviously a Christian symbol in the nativity. And so there is consideration, and Councilmember Schilling is exactly right, that there are groups that will watch for this and target the city in making such a decision. I can certainly review the new standard that was adopted in light of the Lemon test, but ultimately there is still a standard that applies. The Lemon test doesn't throw out the First Amendment and the Establishment Clause. The other item, as Representative Schilling, or Councilmember Schilling indicated, is the concept of not having the city established, but establishing some sort of public forum where members could sponsor or put up themselves, but then that, again, has to be content neutral, so it can't be limited to just nativity. It would have to be open to everybody. But certainly, we can take a look, review the new standard, provide opinion to the council, but generally speaking, it is, from a legal standpoint, it is a difficult hill for the city to climb to avoid liability lawsuit from outside groups who are going to enforce and do actively nationwide review and enforce those First Amendment protections, particularly with regards to these type of religious subjects. But I certainly, it sounds like I have direction from council. We'll take a harder look at it, provide further opinion, and then we can have that forwarded along.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
you. We
Thank you for
appreciate you
coming
coming up. All right, is there anyone else? I have somebody on here from West Comfort Lake. I'm thinking that might have been something else. Okay. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'm sorry, to number 2, approval of minutes. Consider approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for July 5th, 2023. Are there any comments or questions? If not, we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Member Onstead. Do we have a second? Second by Member Luker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Consent agenda number 3. Here, we get a lot of feedback. Number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the consent agenda. Does any council member wish to pull an item from the consent agenda for further review? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve consent agenda 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by Member Onstead. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. We're moving on to acknowledge receipts of reports of officers, boards, commissions, and department heads. Number 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Does anybody wish to pull an item for a report? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Number 14, to consider ordinance 2023-02, an ordinance of the City of Wyoming, Chisago County, Minnesota, adding Chapter 20, Article 5. Is that B?
Correct.
Good. Division 1, use of cannabis flower, cannabis product, lower potency hemp edibles or hemp-derived consumer products in public spaces. Mr. Linwood, is that you or Mr. Lunan?
I will start. I think we'll probably both have some input in regards to the items before you. I'll give some background, really be pertinent to number 14, 15, 16, and 17 in regards to this, but we'll certainly start out with number 15, as Mayor Iverson just read. The City of Wyoming has been working with its legal counsel, Eckberg and Lammers, and Mr. Lunan exclusively to provide guidance for the city with the newly adopted legislation for adult cannabis. This legislation session, Minnesota adopted a new law legalizing this. Along with legalizing adult use cannabis, the legislation adopted a series of laws creating various license schemes for cannabis businesses and hemp businesses, creating the Office of Cannabis Management to regulate the cannabis and hemp industry, and importantly for Minnesota cities, setting forth options for local control by cities. On August 1st, 2023, use of recreational cannabis by adults is legal, but the sale of cannabis products, and lower potency hemp edibles is not legal until the Office of Cannabis Management begins issuing cannabis business and hemp business licenses. The legislature did not identify a date when the OCM will begin accepting, processing, and granting applications for cannabis businesses and hemp businesses, but general consensus assumes it'll be a year or more before the OCM begins issuing license. Through the specific date cannot be predicted at this time. The Office of Cannabis Management must consult with the city prior to issuing a license for cannabis business or hemp business and operating to ensure the business complies with the city's zoning code. Once the OCM issues a license for a cannabis business or hemp business, the city must issue registration for the license or operation in their city unless the city has provided consent from the county to issue registration for their jurisdiction. Going short, there are some more information regarding the lower potency cannabinoids and the higher potency. There's some different things also for the council to be consideration of. Importantly, a city can possess zoning and land use controls through which the city may regulate a cannabis business location, a number of cannabis businesses in the city. A city must allow at least one cannabis business registration for every 12,500 residents, and a city may also permit more than the minimum required by state law. Cities may prohibit the operations of cannabis business within 1,000 feet of school, 500 feet of daycare, residential treatment facility, or attraction within a public park that is regularly used by minors, including a playground or athletic field. In short, cities have options to prohibit use of cannabis product in public places, restrict the hours of cannabis businesses, limit the number of cannabis businesses, place reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions for cannabis businesses, and finally prohibit cannabis businesses with an interim ordinance through January 1, 2025. Cities also have the option to regulate and restrict hemp businesses with their traditional regulatory authority. Cities do not have the option to prohibit cannabis use in their city, and they do not have the option to prohibit cannabis business in the city beyond January 1, 2025. And then as also that cities may operate a municipal cannabis store as well. In summary, the use in cannabis is lawful as of August 1, 2023, but currently no business is authorized to sell cannabis, and regulation, licensing, and local zoning controls for both hemp and cannabis remain to be developed. How regulation of hemp cannabinoids will impact edible cannabis remains to be determined. As a result, here are the following options we recommend to the city tonight. For the first ordinance that the mayor read is Ordinance 2302. This ordinance would be prohibiting the use of cannabis flower, cannabis product, lower potency hemp edibles, hemp-derived consumer product in public places. To ensure that such prohibition is clear, law enforcement in many cities has requested such an ordinance be adopted. The ordinance would permit law enforcement in the city of Wyoming to charge individuals using such products in public places with a petty misdemeanor, while the city of Wyoming cannot prohibit the use of such products at private residence, private property, or where owner permits the use, or the premises of an establishment or event licensed to permit on-site consumption. The city can prohibit it just about everywhere else within the ordinance. So essentially, the first ordinance for the council review tonight is a ordinance that would not allow the use. It would exclude public places. It would be essentially all of our parks, all of our trails. That would match what we have right now for our tobacco and liquor in parks. We don't allow that right now in any of those either. So with that, I know a lot of information shared in the overall of this, but I guess we'll focus right now if there's any questions regarding the first ordinance we have in place is for the use of cannabis flower, lower potency edibles, or hemp-derived consumer products in public places.
All right, that was a lot.
It is a lot.
So just so everybody is clear, we were talking about ordinance 2023-02 and ordinance 2023-03. So, I'm sorry, ordinance 2023-02 and 2023-03. So, council, I'll come to you each individually as we usually do.
Well, I think, Madam Mayor, I
Yeah.
think right now, we are just talking about 2023-02.
Oh, and two,
Which is
and
an
then you're gonna,
ordinance.
And then we'll go.
Then we'll
and then
talk
we'll
a
go
little bit
into the other
more.
one.
Yep.
And
Okay.
just to kind of summarize this specific ordinance, as Administrator Linwood said, this is the ordinance that would outlaw public use of cannabis products.
so
and
parks,
trails, walking down the sidewalk, all of that, it would make it petty misdemeanor.
okay,
Because essentially, the law is written in such a way that August 1st, cannabis is legal. People can smoke it, and the law does not prohibit where they can smoke it. The law does allow cities to regulate, if they so choose, public places within their city by making it petty misdemeanor. And so here is a proposal to the council to outlaw, and as Administrator Linwood said, when we were looking at this, we discussed with the Chief Public Safety Director Bauer as well, and the city already outlaws tobacco and it outlaws alcohol. It's sort of a natural third step. Without it, people are gonna be allowed to do it, start wherever they're gonna get it from, because you can't sell it, but starting August 1st, they can use it.
okay. So it's really putting the ordinances in line,
Kind
like
of.
to our liquor or whatever. I mean, it kind of encompasses that we have with our other ordinances like liquor and smoking, correct?
Currently, we don't allow tobacco
Yep.
or liquor in public parks.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so, Member Luger, any questions or comments?
Nope, no questions.
Right, Member Onstad,
No questions.
Member Schilling.
Yeah, just a question. Mr. Linwood, you'd said that nobody's gonna be allowed to sell it for a year is what I had read in there, up to the first year. But I did see in the story when I was looking into this that native reservations, all of them can dispense as of August 1st, if that's correct.
That is correct.
So it
Yeah.
will be available publicly if you drive to those said locations, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, in a legal format, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it is also worth noting, Councilmember Schilling, that citizens can also grow it, I think up to 10 plants.
Yep.
Legally, they're not allowed to plant the seeds until August 1st. But again, I anticipate we will see people with marijuana starting on August 1st.
Okay,
Yeah, and then also I had seen that they're putting out a class on how to grow it, the state is, which kind of blew my mind, but, okay. And then, does this cover people in their vehicles? Is that considered public?
I don't think this specific ordinance would cover people within their vehicles, however, there's other regulation, and I can defer to Public Safety Director
Right.
Bauer, but that would,
I mean, this be no different than open container is what I'm getting at, if I understand it correctly.
I'd have to look into it further it's whether or not it's I'll look into it. I don't wanna give wrong information.
I get the flashback to the 70s movies where people fall out of a car and there's smoke rolling out and, they're at the public park, so that was my reason for the question.
I'm
so.
too young to remember that, so, okay.
All right, that was it for my questions, thank you.
All right, and Member Yeager.
Okay, when you say that it would match what we do for tobacco and alcohol, do we have ordinances already written that say you cannot use tobacco in public, you cannot use alcohol in public.
We do have codes, right, that we would not allow, right, when you, our parks and it is, yes, in our zoning code and then, or in our code, I should say, and then also for any kind of when we have rentals of our pavilions or parks, alcohol is not allowed within them.
But, I mean, I do notice people do smoke in our parks and do smoke walking down the street. So is cannabis going to be treated equally to that? Or are we just going to target cannabis and not the tobacco? I realize we would not permit anyone to drink from an open container walking down the street.
I think, go ahead, I think.
Certainly. So ultimately, if people are smoking in the parks, people are drinking in the parks, they are violating the law. And it's gonna be the same with this. And if the officers are aware of that, they can respond to it. One of the things with cities that we've worked with and police departments is allowing them the opportunity to respond to these types of complaints and deal with them. Just as if someone, were to be smoking or drinking at the parks, we do have ordinances that outlaw that. But certainly just because we have ordinances doesn't mean people aren't violating those, and we're not gonna catch everybody in every instance.
I was more concerned that if there would be legal liabilities for not treating cannabis equal to tobacco and alcohol. Somebody might come back and say, you're discriminating, you allow this, but you don't allow that, and, just to make sure it's ironclad.
Certainly, I understand what you're saying. The city has the authority to, prohibit within public spaces any of those 3 activities. And however a city chooses to do that, whether it's 1, whether it's 2, whether it's 3, and however strictly those are being enforced within the city, that doesn't open the city up to any sort of liability. If the city were to choose and say, we are not going to prohibit cannabis in public spaces, that would not change the prohibition on smoking or drinking, and it would not open up any sort of argument from somebody who would be charged with the petty misdemeanor on smoking or drinking to make a claim that they are being discriminated against because we didn't
Okay.
outlaw cannabis.
So you got it nice and ironclad. All right, how does this apply? Is somebody's yard, like if they're sitting in their garage, is that considered private?
That's considered private.
Okay,
So the ordinance is written in such a way that it's actually sort of an exclusive definition of public place. And so, I mean, it's very brief, where a public place excludes the following, meaning if it's not excluded here, it applies everywhere else. And so it's those 3 items: private residence, or in their curtilage or yard, so someone can be in their yard smoking.
okay,
It's private property, not accessible to the public unless the owner of that property explicitly prohibits the use of cannabis on the property. Individual businesses are entitled to make their own regulations, at least presently under the law. And then the premise of an establishment of an event licensed to permit on-site consumption. So if we were to establish through the process, which we'll talk about next, the ability for somebody to get a permit to allow cannabis, just as we would potentially alcohol, then that would be excluded from this. Everything else would be considered within that public
Okay.
space.
and then the last question, I noticed that this ordinance isn't required, we don't need a public hearing on it.
That is correct. No
What
necessary-
makes this different than the next one?
This is just, this doesn't have anything to do, well, the next one is not either. It'd be the one that we'd be calling for a public hearing for would be a yet to be determined one.
The city is only required to have a public hearing on ordinance changes that are related to zoning. This is not a zoning ordinance, so there's no requirement for a public hearing. And we can explain within the next 2. One of them, no public hearing is required because statutorily we're not required to do it. And then the second one is under the new law that will be enacted, which does explicitly require the public hearing, which is why we need it there. And we'll talk about those at once.
Okay, but it's basically, we don't need one.
We don't need one, correct.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Chief Bauer, just a quick clarification. I believe that our officers are very well-trained and educated on any new ordinances that come through, and they usually educate first, right? If they see somebody that is violating one of these ordinances, the first thing is you're gonna train them on, you know, you can't, especially cannabis, right? You can't be having cannabis in a public area. And I'm assuming it'll be the same for this ordinance as well, right? Education first.
It's always up to the officer's discretion, but that's usually the approach we would take initially, would be to inform what kind of the parameters are, and we're all learning right now. As you can understand, this is a huge change, so there's going to be a lot of learning along the way as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, I'll make the motion for approving the ordinance 2023-02, an ordinance of the City of Wyoming, Chisago County, Minnesota, adding chapter 20. You guys can add the rest into that. So, all right, I make the first motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Luger. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 15, ordinance 2023-03, an interim ordinance of the City of Wyoming, Chisago County, Minnesota, prohibiting the establishment of new uses related to operations of cannabis businesses and hemp businesses for 1 year under Minnesota State Statute 462.355, subdivision number 4. Mr. Linwood and Mr. Lunan.
Thank you, Mayor. The next one we have up, as you see, is ordinance 2023-03. This is under Minnesota State Statute 462.335, subdivision 4, which allows for an interim moratorium. Essentially, the interim ordinance is prohibiting the operation of hemp businesses for a period of 1 year. It would include a moratorium on cannabis, which remain in effect until the cannabis and hemp moratorium recommended below is enacted. The legislature did not give cities the options to prohibit the operation of hemp businesses within an interim ordinance through 2025. This means cities may only adopt an interim ordinance for 1 year. Adopting an interim ordinance will give the city time to adopt or amend official controls for cannabis businesses and hemp business prior to the OCM approving licenses in the city, and essentially allows the city time to do due diligence, planning, study on what those regulations will be and what that means and the impact on the licensing as we look at those potential zoning laws or other ordinances that the city would want to apply in regards to cannabis.
Okay. All right, again, questions from council. We'll start from member Yeager.
Okay, so we enact this ordinance, and it goes for 1 year, so as of July 18th, 2024, this ordinance disappears, right?
Correct. So in this situation, we can actually look at the next two ordinances sort of together. And what this approach is it's kind of a belt and suspenders approach. The next recommendation is going to be to set the public hearing for a separate moratorium. And that, as I noted earlier, is the moratorium that statutorily will be created under the new law and requires a public hearing. However, the new law does not go into effect until August 1st. And so there's differing school of thought, but our firm, myself, we are of the opinion that you really can't enact a moratorium under that new law until it's in effect, until August 1st. So we have to wait to do that, and we have to wait, we do the public hearing and enact the new law. Here, the city does have authority under its zoning authority, under state statute 462355, to put a moratorium in place relating to zoning and relating to use so that we won't be caught in a situation where we're in a limbo that a business may come in and establish itself with a right to sell cannabis. And if a business establisher has a right and we subsequently enact a moratorium, they are grandfathered in. That moratorium does not apply to that business. So here we are putting a halt on from a zoning perspective because city does need to conduct study and consideration with regards to how we're going to zone this type of use, both looking at, you know, the sale and potentially the production if that's something that's of consideration, the 12,500 people consideration. There's just things that the city has to think about, and that does apply under the zoning code. So it really is kind of a belt and suspenders approach here where this one will be enacted for 1 year. That's what the zoning code allows. The moratorium under the new law, under the 342 chapter that will be enacted August 1st, will allow us to go until January 1st, 2025, and that will specifically relate to cannabis and hemp business. But yes, council member, Yeager, that was a long way. You are correct, this will expire in July, but it's, again, that belt and suspenders, that will be the second ordinance that will be coming up here.
Okay, and then you're assuming, because in the memo, you assume that the Office of Cannabis Management won't be ramped up or have their acts together to issue license for at least a year or more. Is that correct?
Based, well.
That's a suspicion. No, I mean,
Nobody knows.
theoretically, they could establish themselves August 1st, get their rules in place, and issue licenses in the middle of August. Realistically, that's not likely gonna be the timeframe. Most people are looking at it, most people within government who understand processes and how these things work, they anticipate it will probably be sometime in the first quarter of 2025.
That's
Could
what
it be quicker than that? It could be. Will things change as we go? Absolutely, because once the Office of Cannabis Management is established, part of what they're gonna be doing is doing some rulemaking and putting additional regulation and rules in place around this. And so this is gonna be kind of a moving thing. It's, as Public Safety Director Bauer said, it's a new law, there's a lot of pieces to it, and there's a lot of unknown about it that is gonna get hashed out big time once this Office of Cannabis Management is established and starts putting out different rules and procedures. But ultimately, the anticipation is probably not until 2025. Could it be sooner? It could. If it's sooner and the city decides that they want to start allowing these businesses to operate in the city of Wyoming, the city will have the right to revoke these moratoriums if we so choose. So there is an opportunity. If the licenses are starting to get issued and we're saying, well, we want to allow these businesses to come into Wyoming, we think we're ready, we can revoke the moratorium and allow them to come in at any time at the discretion of council, obviously.
Okay, so long story short, this basically protects the city in case the state does get their act together and start issuing licenses before the year is out.
Correct, and I think the latest that we've heard, through some discussions I've had with other city administrators, people at the Capitol, and then the League of Minnesota Cities, is they would be surprised if it had happened this year, kind of to echo what City Attorney Lunan said. So I think that's best case scenario, to hear something by the end of the year, but I think we're being proactive and like you said.
And
to try
covering
to-
our,
Mhm.
and protecting our butts.
To make sure that if we do have the moratorium in place, why we do the due diligence and
Okay.
work through that, present council with drafts of what that would look like, and then we essentially have that time, and if it's completed earlier, so be it. But we have the time that is necessary to make sure that we're doing this to what the council sees fit for the city.
Okay, that's all I had.
All right, Member Schilling?
He had actually answered my question about the moratorium. Can
Okay.
it be lifted at any point if they get their act together? And the answer was yes, so, thank you.
Member Onstad?
Just a summary, this is kind of a housekeeping that prevents, that closes any open doors. Would that be a fair way to say that, how this works?
Correct, yes. I think that's a fair way to say it. I mean, this gives us some additional protection to just ensure that we're not gonna get caught off guard. August 1st, application comes in, we don't have the 342 moratorium in place. I know within the cities that I work with, it's no secret, businesses are chomping at the bit to get in on this, get themselves established for several reasons. One of them obviously being first in. Other one is, there is this potential of restriction on how many are gonna be allowed in communities, and if you're in and then they put the restriction, you're gonna be in, so.
All right, Member Luger?
Just with regards to how the city will kind of develop controls and regulations with how the OCM does, do we anticipate, I guess, how will those jive together, right? Like, so the OCM develops kind of some standards and regulations and I would assume recommendations. What, how much flexibility do individual cities and will the city of Wyoming have to develop their own local control?
I think based on the statute, obviously, there's definite controls that are necessary, but there is some different things in regards to the type of operations, those hours, what they can be as far as the events. So I think there is some opportunity for the council to review and to determine what exactly they want in that. There's going to be, I know, example ordinances coming out from the League of Minnesota Cities. They're going to be working on this. I have a meeting next week to listen in on some different things that they're gonna be proposing too. So I think we'll have different ways to look at it, and obviously up for discussion. I think there's probably some real ways of doing it, following exactly on the statute, and then some ability to try to, I guess, move away from that, and if the council sees fit to how we wanna regulate some of those things.
Thank you.
Well, just I mean, it's a great question, and it was a heavy point of debate at the legislature as this was going through with regards to local control. And I will say that within the municipal community, we probably would have liked to have had more control and allow the cities to be able to better regulate and control. Rob, Administrator Linwood indicated sort of what our rights are, and it really is zoning related. It's with regards to how we zone it, where they can operate, hours of operation, and then the potential restriction on the amount that we would allow in our city if we want. We have to at least allow one per 12,500. But other than that, the legislature has not, with this law, is not allowing cities to pass much more regulation. We don't license them. We don't have a lot of heavy control outside of zoning. A lot of that falls to the state, it falls to the OCM. So we're hoping for good, regulation and guidance. They will be consulting with the cities before issuing licenses, but again, that consultation just relates to the zoning piece, because our ability as a city to regulate these types of businesses pursuant to the statute is really limited to that type of zoning regulation and the potential for restricting how many.
Thank you.
Mr. Lonan, just for clarity, OCM stands for?
Office of Cannabis Management.
Thank you. I think I have a statement, and you can comment on it as well. We have another session to go through, starting in, let's see, it's a long session, I believe. So starting in February until the end of session, where some of this could change anyways, right? So having a year moratorium, seeing what the next year will happen in this next session, maybe things will change. So I think it's a great idea to put a moratorium on this.
Yeah, and I will, you're absolutely right, Mayor, with the upcoming session, because there are things, as now people are going through it, obviously city attorneys, different people within that type of industry, those regulated industries are looking at it. There's obviously things that got missed that weren't thought of. For instance, it's touched on in the memo, but there's regulations on the cannabinoid, but there's not regulations on hemp. And so, are we gonna loop those in? And then with regards to what's been passed previously with the low potency edibles, those are kind of treated differently under this, and it creates a little bit of confusion because there's really 3 different types of plants that we're talking about, or types of uses that we're talking about, but they're regulated differently. And we're hoping there will be some uniformity that's brought into the law come the next session. But right now, we're just operating with what we have.
With caution. Is liquid included in that as well? I keep hearing about beer that has cannabis in it and drinks and that, you know what I mean?
Correct.
I'm not a drinker, but, cannabis beer, cannabis White
So
Claw.
those
There's.
THC beverages, those are treated differently.
Okay.
And I would assume liquor stores in town and potentially bars may be already selling them, and this moratorium wouldn't stop them from doing
Okay,
that.
perfect. All right, any other
And
questions?
I have a question. Will this, do we intend to, I don't know how quite to phrase it, regulate cannabis more strictly than, let's say, we regulate alcohol? Is it like 2 different tracks of how to, if you want to put a liquor store in town or if you want to put a dispensary in town?
I think it probably more strict in the sense that there's only one allowed every 12,500 people. So we obviously have multiple liquor stores here, where if there was a dispensary, there'd be one. Cities, as Mr. Lunan said, we don't have a lot of. There are some pretty elongated hours for those dispensaries. We do have some ability to reel those in if we would want. But that, like I said again, will be at the discretion of the council. Some of the, and the zoning authorities in regards to the things that we can do from 1,000 feet from school, 500 feet from the daycare or residential treatment, things like that. But as Mr. Lunan said, right now, there aren't a ton of, I guess, really more restrictive things the city can do. Hours of operation is one, and then just essentially limiting licensing just based on that statute. So there's not really a ton.
Right, but we don't, we don't zone, do we zone liquor stores, you know, where they can't be by schools, by daycares?
There is, I believe there is some language in there in regards to distances from like schools or daycares within there, but nothing real significant, otherwise they're allowed in all of our most of our commercial, central business, all of our, as far as the zoning component. But I believe there is some language in regards next to like schools or daycares, I believe yes, there is some.
Cause I thought, you know, like, for example, Lick's Liquor looks pretty close to Apple, to that Apple Academy.
Yeah, it's 500 feet, well, I mean, for the
Okay.
cannabis, it's 500, so if it is 500, it really, 500 feet really isn't, isn't that far when you think. Yeah, and Rick's could have been, kind of grandfathered in based on how the duration of time they've been.
Okay.
I will, Councilmember, just sort of emphasize that the reason why we're suggesting this moratorium in this ordinance or resolution now is to allow the city time to have those discussions about how do you guys want to regulate it? What does the city of Wyoming want to do? Do we want to adhere to the 1 per 12,500? Do we want to potentially open to more? And all those are going to be discussions that we're going to have. And, Administrator Linwood, that everybody in the state on a municipal level is dealing with this. There's new information coming out almost daily. And as this goes into law August 1st, there's going to be a lot of learning. Things are going to come forward. So it's going to be kind of moving pieces, but this just puts a pause and allows the city to determine how they want to regulate this product. If they want to do it the same as alcohol, if they want to do it differently, but it just gives us that opportunity and allows for kind of that information to kind of keep being exchanged amongst people within the municipal community.
Okay.
All right, if there are no further questions, I'll make the motion to approve ordinance 2023-03. I'll let you add in the rest of the verbiage. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Schilling, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so approved. Number 16, to consider a public hearing on August 15, 2023 for an interim ordinance of the City of Wyoming, Chisago County, Minnesota, prohibiting the operation of cannabis businesses in the city under statute 342.13E. Do we want to continue the conversation or have we maxed that out?
I would just emphasize, this is the one that will be enacted under the new law that goes into effect August 1st, and if there's any additional questions.
Any additional questions?
All
Okay.
right, so if it's, then how do we get it past July 20th, 2024?
The law, the way that the law is written under 342, the new law that will be enacted, it specifically allows the city to have an interim ordinance until January 1st, 2025.
Okay, cool.
So we need a motion to approve a public hearing on August 15, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by member Luker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by member Schilling. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 17, to discuss the easterly section of the East Viking Boulevard Street project. And I believe it's Mr. Erickson's time maybe for this, or are we having somebody else?
Start?
Sure. Mr. Linwood and I may tag team on this item here. So you may recall with our bid project, we had identified a project there that would really consist of patching the holes in the roadway, the potholes, and then simply an overlay. And as our assessment policy reads, that is not an assessable type project where we just simply do an overlay. This is something was more of a stopgap measure, if you will, because we simply didn't have the resources or the funds to expend to do the ultimate fix, what we would like to do with, meaning reclaiming the roadway and paving it. And so we've had a number of conversations with Polaris through this process, along with Chisago City as well. I'm not sure if many of you have been out there recently, but the road is a landmine. It's very difficult to navigate. It's very difficult to get through the roadway at all. And so we've approached Polaris once again and talked to them a little bit about a more permanent fix, and what that would mean would be reclaiming the roadway. We wouldn't patch the roadway, so we'd save some money there. We'd reclaim the roadway and pave that to maybe not our typical street section, but something close to it. And that we would bring this to the city council if they were inclined to pay for that additional cost. That cost has been identified in that $65,000 to $70,000 range. Polaris has indicated that they are interested in that. they don't have those funds budgeted to just pay for that project up front, that $65,000 or $70,000 up front. When we met with Polaris, I should say, you know, I'm throwing a couple numbers out there. That 65,000 number was really a rough estimate that we provided Polaris. And again, I'm still at that stage. I have a little bit more information from our contractor and think it might be closer to 70,000, but it's in that ballpark. And so Polaris, we asked them if they were interested. They indicated they were. But the caveat would be that that would need to be assessed to them in 2024. They have not budgeted those funds for 2023. And so they're asking if, you know, they're inclined to do that if the council is okay. There would be an assessment agreement that we would have in place before the work was done to ensure that they do contribute to that. It would be payable in one calendar year. It wouldn't be over 5 years or over a 10-year period. It would be in 2024, as soon as the calendar, we would work on the date of the timing of that. But then they would pay that assessment in full in 2024. And so with that, I think staff is wanting to understand council's position on that. I think staff's recommendation is that we do move forward with that. We end up with a project that is better and we're not paying anything more. And we won't have to revisit this in 3, 5, 7 years, however long we thought this other alternate fix would work. And so staff is recommending council move forward with giving staff direction to move forward with. There's not a resolution with this, right, Rob?
No, correct.
So just to give staff direction to move forward with an agreement with Polaris, we would bring that back to city. Actually, what I'm asking is to move forward with an agreement and authorize the mayor to sign that agreement. We likely will be potentially doing this work in advance of our next city council meeting. And so we want to make sure that we have kind of your blessing as well as the ability for the mayor to sign that agreement.
Okay.
Did I miss anything, Mr. Linwood?
Nope, I think you covered it all. No,
All right.
that's the last piece that you nailed it.
All right. Member Schilling, we're gonna start with you.
I actually don't have any questions. I like this. I think this solves a problem that we were facing, so I'm fine with it.
All right. Member Yeager?
So the city will continue to pay the $150,000 or so that was going to be for the mill and
I think it was
overlay.
158, 150.
Yeah, and then Polaris would pay the extra $70,000 so that we can now just do a reclamation.
And do it right where we think it'll be a much longer term fix. So
Cool.
it would be, it wouldn't cost the city any more additional funds, correct?
Does the city have the money to float this additional $70,000?
Correct, we have money in the street fund for that.
And since there is an assessment agreement being drawn up, the residents will not be assessed for this, just Polaris?
Just Polaris on that portion of the road.
Okay, cool. That's it.
All right. Member Luker?
I have no questions.
Member Onstead?
Will the city still be continuing to patch and overlay, or patch and fill holes that are in the road currently?
Not on that.
And what does that look like right
Not
now?
on that segment of road. We'll be looking at likely paving that end of July, early August, if what the contractors is telling us stays true. So we won't invest that $17,000 to patch the roadway, only to grind it up 2 weeks later. So that would continue as is until that project moves forward.
So we actually save a lot of money doing that.
Well, we've taken that out, so we still would pay our portion. The net excess, so we've taken that, it actually is a net excess of, say, 87,000, but we're saving the 17,000 in patching, and so the net excess is that $70,000, $65,000 or $70,000.
Okay.
Mr. Erickson, we're talking this year, July, August? Wow. I'm sure they'll be really happy with that. That's a bad side of the
And
road, so.
I'm not sure, but this evening, they should be finished with paving East Viking as well, the first layer of asphalt.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Okay, well, that's great news. So, council, what I'm hearing is we're in agreement to move forward with the agreement. All right, so, looks like the council is in agreement to move forward with, the agreement. Do we need an official?
We would need a motion, please, if
Okay,
you would, Mayor.
so I will make the motion. I'm just trying to think of the right verbiage.
We'll make a motion to move forward with an agreement between the city and Polaris to allow themselves to be assessed for whatever, the overage for reclamation, and to be payable in full in 2024.
Well, thank you for making that motion. I will then go second on that. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Was there anything else on the agenda, Mr. Linwood, that we?
That is our last item, Mayor.
That's it, okay. All right, so we're gonna go to reports really quick. We're gonna start with Member Yeager,
No report. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for watching.
Member Schilling,
I attended the EDA last Monday. Thank you all for coming out, and those of you that spoke, thanks for who's watching. Have a great night.
thank you. Member Onstad,
No reports. Thanks for everyone being here tonight.
all right. Member Luker,
I attended the sewer budget meeting as well as the regular sewer meeting last night. Thank you for coming.
all right. I attended the Economic Development Authority meeting, the budget meeting for the joint sewer, and also the regular joint sewer meeting as well. And I do have to say congratulations to Mr. Lunan. I understand that you are in the top 100 new attorneys in the state of Minnesota. Is it top new, or is it just top one?
10 years out, but I don't think it was top 100, that seems a little impressive.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was on LinkedIn. But I was thinking the top 5. But we're all good. Yeah, top 1. Yeah, well, congratulations on the top 1, I'm sure top 100, so at least. So I think it's an honor to be able to have an attorney in that group, right? I know your face is turning red, so I think it's really important, and it goes to show just your advice and what you give the city and other cities as well. So congratulations on that, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Bauer, you had on a shirt today about the run. Did you want to speak about that? The 5K, did we talk about that yet? I just want to make sure it gets the kudos it deserves.
We were unable to participate this year, but we did buy shirts.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
That's good.
unfortunately,
But
we
you-
had an
you had a good
incident
reason.
that came up, and
Yeah.
we were not able to run. So
Okay, but you
next-
still
next year-
supported.
Yes, next year we will
Okay.
be ready to go.
Okay, and can you state what that organization is?
Sure, it's for Special Olympics, Torch Run.
Okay, that's
Yes.
amazing. I think our community is great when it comes to organizations and charities, so thank you so
Thank you.
much. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Would everybody like to say yes?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?